Good morning, I'm Maiki Oreta, and you're watching Basis Points, where we dive deep into the numbers and the stories that drive our economy and shape our world. Now, up ahead, U.S. stocks hit record highs, rebounding from a brief setback after Federal Reserve Chair Jerome Powell says he's in no hurry to implement further rate cuts. Filipino investors will soon be able to trade foreign stocks listed on overseas exchanges as the Philippine Stock Exchange prepares to launch a new product, Global Philippine Depositary Receipts, or GPDRs. Now, we'll talk about this and more with the CEO and President of AIA Investment Management and Trust Corporation, Philippines, Angel Pasis. The Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas and the Bankers Association of the Philippines are set to enhance short-term benchmarks, including peso interest rate swaps and a repo market for government securities. And Japan marks 60 years since the launch of its first Shinkansen bullet train, which revolutionized rail travel globally. First, let's take a look at how markets in Asia are doing. So far, it's a mixed performance in early trade as Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell signals smaller rate cuts in the next policy meeting. Japan's Nikkei 225 is up by 1% after a 5% decline yesterday, while Australia's ASX 200 is down by more than 0.5%. Over in South Korea, Hong Kong and mainland China are closed for a public holiday today, with mainland China closed for the week due to the Golden Week holiday. Over on Wall Street, the Dow Jones and S&P 500 ended at record highs. The Dow Jones posted marginal gains, while the S&P and the tech-heavy Nasdaq inched up by 0.4%. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell says the U.S. Central Bank isn't in a rush to cut interest rates, but indicates that future movements could be smaller.
The market going down today a little, I think, is just a reflection of it taking pause after what's been happening, especially last week and maybe the week before. I mean, to step back for a second, usually September is not a good month of the year. Since 1950, the average rate of return of the S&P for the month of September is negative, 0.5% to 1%. To give you an idea where we're at now, the market went down 4% the first week. After that, it rocketed back to where it is now. We're up about 1.5%. So it's been a great September.
Over in Europe, main indices were mostly lower. The UK's FTSE lost 1% following the downward revision of Britain's second quarter economic growth. Germany's DAX dropped nearly 0.8%, while France's CAC 40 fell 2%. In the commodities market, oil prices remain steady amid growing geopolitical risks in the Middle East. Brent is up by 0.2%, trading at $71.20 a barrel. Meanwhile, gold is moving sideways with an upward bias supported by a weaker dollar and lower bond yields. Now, the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas aims to strengthen the swap market to improve the transmission of monetary policy. The central bank and the Bankers Association of the Philippines are launching a peso interest rate swap market to enhance the benchmark yield curve, making it easier to price short-term loans and bonds. The BSP also plans to develop the repurchase agreement, or the repo market, a key part of the financial system where participants can borrow and lend money using government securities as collateral. Now, this will boost the trading of government debt securities. This comes as officials say that the country must address the fragmented government bond market and improve the yield curve to attract more foreign capital. Meanwhile, BSP Governor Eli Remolona Jr. says that it's possible to bring the reserve requirement ratio for big banks down to zero before his term ends in 2029. Remolona adds that policymakers are considering lowering the RRR to 5% as the current 7% is still seen as high. The reserve requirement ratio for big banks will be reduced by 250 basis points to 9.5% effective October 25th. The Securities and Exchange Commission is launching a futures market in the country as part of its efforts to strengthen and diversify the capital market. The commission is partnering with the U.S. Commodity Futures Trading Commission and the Asian Development Bank to hold a training workshop on derivatives regulation. The week-long training covers practical topics like setting legal rules, protecting investors, designing contracts, and making sure transactions run smoothly. This training is part of a broader initiative to create regulations for commodity futures and an electricity derivatives market, which provides more options for investors and boosts the economy. Now, the wealth of the country's taipans surges in September, riding the Philippine stock market's dizzying ascent to multi-year highs. The collective fortune of the country's richest on the Forbes list rises 3% month on month to $52.6 billion in September. Former Senate President Manny Villar holds on to the top spot with $14.4 billion, up 2.3%, as his memorial business, Golden Haven, boosted its value to over 1 trillion pesos. Not far behind is ports mogul Ricky Razon in second place, with his net worth climbing to $12 billion. The heirs of the late Henry C. saw their net worth grow by 7% to nearly $14 billion thanks to gains in SM Investments, BDO, and SM Prime Holdings. This comes as the Philippine Stock Exchange Index surged 10% month on month in September following the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas' move to cut the reserve requirements of banks. Now, President Bongbong Marcos inaugurates the first electric vehicle battery factory in the Philippines. Marcos says that the STB Gigafactory in New Clark City marks a major step for the country towards becoming a key player in the clean energy storage space. He also notes that the facility will create 2,500 local jobs and pump 5 billion pesos into the economy annually. The Australian-owned factory aims to produce 2 gigawatt hours of batteries per year by 2030, which could power about 18,000 electric vehicles or nearly 500,000 home battery systems. With the ongoing threat of global warming, more companies are stepping up their efforts to promote sustainable practices. Sujin Kim has the details.
In a bold move to challenge the perception that sustainability is a luxury, a young real estate company is leading the charge towards net zero building practices. Arfaland aims to bring sustainable lifestyles to the mid-market, a segment often overlooked in the green building movement. The building and construction industry accounts for a staggering 39% of global energy-related carbon emissions. With global warming projected to raise temperatures by 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030, the urgency for sustainable practices has never been greater.
We have started showing people that sustainability is not just for those who can afford. Hindi lang pang mayaman. It's actually for everyone to have and to feel. And it cannot be a legacy if it's not sustainable.
Senior architect at the WTA Architecture and Design Studio, William T., also cites the challenges posed by urban density.
Higher density leads to higher GDP per capita. Lower density leads to urban sprawl. Urban sprawl means you have to service more and more of your city. You have to build more roads, more power lines, serving fewer people. It eats up open space. So we have fewer and fewer open space. It eats up agricultural land.
And the need for urban planning.
Metro Manila is actually one of the biggest cities in the world in terms of population. We're living in very crowded conditions because we have not built vertically.
As for power, one of the key players in the sector aims to reach a total generation capacity of 9,200 megawatts by 2030, with plans to triple its renewable energy output to 4,600 megawatts. Aboitiz Power highlights the country's low energy consumption compared to neighboring countries, noting that Filipinos consume an average 18 gigajoules per person, significantly lower than the global average of 76.
It just shows how the energy consumption ng Pilipinas na compared sa ating mga kapitbahay sa ASEAN. So it's gone very little from 1960 to the year 2020. The GDP per capita ng Pilipinas has only risen very little. And with that, yung konsumo natin ng electricity or energy has risen very little. We're one of the lowest in terms of energy use.
The company also emphasizes the need for more reliable energy sources to drive productivity and attract investments. Sujin Kim, BNC.
We're taking a quick break. Please stay with us as we dive deep into the numbers and the narratives that matter most to your bottom line.
Simulan na natin ang agenda.
Hindi kinagat ni Vice President Sara Duterte ang panawagan na magbitiw na lang siya sa pwesto.
Patuloy ang paghihikayat sa mga Pinoy sa Lebanon na i-avail na ang Voluntary Repatriation Program.
Do you think it was fair to have mentioned na may sinasabing may isang ex-PNP chief without dagdag na impormasyon tungkol doon?
No, very unfair yun.
Sa bawat issue may anggulo at ang balita may agenda.
What is your biggest mistake?
My greatest beefsteak.
I wanted to do that before I aura.
Aura.
Yeah.
We shine a light on the trailblazers, the disruptors, the titans of industry.
I'm going to eat healthy. It's expensive. Guess what's more expensive? The hospital.
We're not just talking about success stories here. We're diving deep into their hearts and minds to see what drives them.
Ibalik mo ako.
Let's go.
Naiikot ako.
We are live. We are
Industry Beat on BNC, the Billionario News Channel.
This is the scorecard where you score the latest news and in-depth views. I'm Anton Rojas, and this is tonight's roundup. On the scorecard tonight, feel like you're somebody who has that desire. Tell us about your experience. Get ready for a thrilling clash, thrilling hostilities, and keep your eyes on the prize. Sports is our business, and business is our sport. This has been the scorecard.
10 p.m. on BNC, the Billionario News Channel.
Welcome back to Basis Points. Exciting times are ahead for Filipino investors thanks to a new initiative led by Philippine Stock Exchange President Juan Monzon. Soon we'll be able to invest in foreign companies through the Philippine Stock Exchange's new vehicle, the Global Philippine Depositary Receipts, or GPDRs. These peso-denominated instruments will allow local investors to diversify their portfolios with international stocks. While GPDR holders won't have voting rights in the foreign companies, they'll still be able to trade these instruments on the PSE. This initiative is part of the PSE's broader strategy to increase market volume and liquidity, creating more opportunities for investors. This comes as the market continues to grow, with the PSE index on an upward trend amidst the possibility of further monetary easing by the U.S. Federal Reserve and by the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas. Meanwhile, trading at the Philippine Stock Exchange opened just a few minutes ago. Let's take a look at the initial figures. Right now, the PSE index is slightly up by 0.2% to 72.88, not quite in bull market territory anymore, but that's just for now. In any case, the broader all shares index is up as well, up by 0.2% to 39.25. The financials, industrial, holding firms, and mining and oil counters are in the green, while the services and property counters are in the red. Now, taking a look at the foreign exchange market, the peso opens weaker from its previous close of 56.03, opening at 56.20 against the greenback. Now let's talk about the latest developments in the local stock market with the CEO and president of AIA Investment Management and Trust Corporation Philippines, Angel Passes. She joins us live in the studio. Hi, Angel.
Hello, Maiki.
Good to have you. Lots of things going on in the equities side and in the vehicle side for the PSE. A monumental development on the equities front. The launch of a new investment product, the Global Philippine Depositary Receipts, or GPDRs. What are your thoughts on this new vehicle?
Long time coming, a very welcome development that has far-reaching effects because it's going to give investors access to more investment outlets. And as you know, the lack of depth and the lack of options has been one of the things that has prevented capital market development.
Agreed. It's a new product on the block, a new outlet for investors. Really excited about this. Talk to us about the benefits of this new product.
Okay. First and foremost, it's actually going to help investors diversify their portfolios, and it's going to give access to smaller investors. In the past, right, only high net worth individuals can easily access investments from abroad, but now it's actually going to be accessible. And what's interesting about it, it's, you know, even the small unsophisticated investor can have access and benefits from these investment outlets through the institutional fund, the local institutional funds.
That's right. Big and small, they're going to get to take a part in this.
Yes.
Speaking of big and small, you think it's the big institutional investors that are going to pounce on this first?
Yes, initially. I'm sure there's going to be a minimum investment outlet, so access is still not going to be readily available for minimum investable amounts. So it's not going to be readily accessible for small investors, but it will be through the institutional funds. And of course, there's also familiarity. There's always the home bias, right? And I think it's just right that these instruments be accessed through the local institutional funds because there will be professional fund management to overlay the investment.
Now, in terms of the companies that are going to be available on these GPDR listings, it's going to be the bluest of the blue.
Yes, it will be the mainstream names because they know that they'll be dealing with investors who are not really familiar and who will not be in a position to really do fundamental analysis for less known names. So it will be the bluest of the blue.
Of course, right. Lack of voting rights. There's going to be a lack of voting rights when it comes to these GPDR listings. But that's not such of a concern because it's just a small percent of the ownership structure. It doesn't really matter. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, not really because we already know we're going to be too small to influence the voting outcome anyway. So it's really just investors will really just be happy to get access.
And the risks associated with this product, they're going to be Forex risks.
Yes.
Talk to us about that.
All right, because there's going to be, right, if these are foreign denominated, then you have the asset returns plus the foreign exchange component. So that really needs to be emphasized to the investor. And that's also why I'm hopeful that they will access it through institutional fund managers because the institutional fund managers will actually have outlets or mechanisms that will allow them to manage and hedge the foreign exchange risk.
In terms of asset allocation, how much of an investor's portfolio, of course it's different for anybody, do you think how much exposure should they have to GPDRs? Of course it's different. I mean,
yes.
Given the changing interest rate environment, maybe in the past that would have been really interesting to be heavy on that. But now, given that interest rates are coming down, things are really looking good for the Philippine economy.
Yeah.
The upside might be here, but balance is always good.
Yes, yeah. Definitely, it will help the portfolio because it will lessen overall portfolio volatility. In the past, we were stuck with a handful of stocks, a handful of investment outlets. So when there are flows in and out, you see very big swings in the prices, up or down. So that's not really good for the investor. So by adding this instrument, it broadens. So the individual movements of the stocks, that the investments that we had before, is actually going to be muted. Now, overall, we are actually more constructive on equities over fixed income. So it's actually good. Now, what we would actually like to emphasize is that, the outlook for developed market equities is actually improving. So in the past 2 years, developed market equities outperformed emerging market equities. But, with the lower interest rates.
Yeah, the tides are changing.
The tides are definitely changing. So I'd really encourage investors to rethink the weighting to the emerging market equities like the Philippines.
Yeah, bonds are always going to be interesting, but right now, equities need
Over
a
bonds.
lot of consideration right
Yes.
now. Okay, now let's take a look. You mentioned the PSE index. Let's talk about that. Right now, we're up 0.2% to 72.88. Not in bull market territory at this moment. However, the trajectory is still bullish. Talk to us about your outlook for equities.
Okay, we're really actually looking at something like 8,000 at least, although we are expecting from this point on a bit of a technical breather. We are encouraging investors to use the technical breather as a window to catch up. Outlook is very good. We all know that, when interest rates are going down, it's got to be good for equities. But you're seeing a lot of tailwinds for the Philippines, right? Lending, the growth in lending spurred by the reserve requirement ratio cut and falling interest rates is not just going to help banks. It's going to help the economy overall. And, consumer demand and government spending, which has actually been, stymied by inflation and, of course, the attempts of the government to improve their current account deficit. That's all going to go away because, rice prices, which ate up purchasing power.
Going down, rice and oil because of the tariff cuts.
So that's actually firepower for your consumer, and election spending is actually going to start to happen with, election season here. So you have so many tailwinds to support the Philippine economy. And remember, the 6% forecast for GDP next year was there before the RRR cuts.
Speaking of forecasts and firepower for the equities market, September inflation, that's going to be out this Friday. The government expects that to ease further to 2.5% from 3.3% the previous month and 4.4% the month before that. What's your outlook for September inflation?
Okay, we don't see any negative surprise. What's helping the inflation outlook? Rice prices are down. And that's already 7 to 8% of your food basket, which is your biggest component. You had your peso strengthening. You have oil prices going down. So all of those actually support the benign inflation outlook.
So where does that put your outlook for inflation for the full year?
3.5%.
3.5% for 2024 and for 2025?
3%.
3%. So it's headed downwards. In line with expectations of ADB also, they expect inflation to be cooling from now until 2025. That said, expectations for interest rate cuts. We had in the news item earlier, U.S. Federal Reserve Chairman Jerome Powell hinted that the rate cuts in the U.S. won't be as fast and as furious as everyone thought they would be following the supersized cut, right? So how is that going to affect the outlook for equities moving forward?
All right, so it's going to temper the exuberance for the rest of the year, we believe. But the cycle actually is just a pause. The 50 basis point cut was really preemptive, and then they're going to pause to see where the economy is going. But overall, I think they're still looking at a terminal rate of around 3.25%. So that's still around 175 basis points from where we are right now. So it's the trajectory is still down, just not as early as everybody expected.
Okay. Now, speaking of the trajectory and where we are now, the PSC index is up about 14% year to date. How would you describe where we are now, and what does that tell you about where we're headed?
Okay. It's just the first leg, right? I mean, a lot of things have changed since the forecast. So we are expecting a pause in the next few weeks or months, but maybe test 7,000. But we are looking at something like 7,400, 7,450 by year end, and maybe 8,000 by the first half of next year.
And that's just healthy as the market heads higher with all the positive developments. On the asset allocation side, you said bonds are always interesting, but
for now,
take a focus on equities right now.
Yes.
Specifically, what stocks?
Okay. We're an advocate of index investing funds, so a diversified portfolio. But if I had to pick 3 stocks over a 6 to 12 month time horizon, we'd go for BDO, we'd go for Ayala Land, we'd go for Jollibee.
Interest rate sensitive stocks and consumer stock with Jollibee, given the expectations of a 0.5 percentage point cut by the BSP.
Yes, and the valuations, of course. BDO, of course, we know banks are going to do well. But BDO actually enjoys better valuations with price to book of about only 1.45 2024 and 1.3, and they have lower NPL ratios relative to the rest of the banking industry.
Okay, can you share your thoughts on the peso with us, Angel, given the expectations of lower interest rates both here and in the U.S.?
Okay, temporarily we do expect the peso to depreciate a bit. This is seasonally strong dollar because this is when companies purchase dollars to pick up in inventories for the Christmas season, right? So they build up inventory and necessarily they will need dollars. Of course, also the announcement of the Federal Reserve Chairman that they're going to be pausing a bit and observing interest rate cuts. That's actually going to help the dollar a bit. So, but we do expect the appreciation of the peso to continue towards December. December is normally
seasonally.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
When the padala of our OFs come in.
That and all the balikbayan boxes.
Exactly.
Okay, Angel, thank you so much for your time and for sharing your thoughts on the market with us.
Thank you for having me, Maiki.
All right, that was Angel Passes, the CEO and President of AIA Investment Management and Trust Corporation, Philippines. Now, before we go, Japan is famous for many things, and one of them is its iconic Shinkansen bullet train, which turns 60 today. The high-speed trains first began operating between Tokyo and Osaka in 1964, ushering in a new era of travel that inspired the world. Beyond their speed, the Shinkansen became a symbol of Japan's post-war transformation and engineering excellence. Today, the Shinkansen network covers the entire country. While its top speed of 320 kilometers per hour is no longer the world's fastest, the Shinkansen remains a crucial part of Japan's economy and way of life. Keeping it spotlessly clean, always on time, and accident-free is a top priority in Japan. And that's it for Basis Points. I'm Maiki Oreta. We'll be back tomorrow for more news on the financial markets and more. Keep it here on BNC, the Billionario News Channel, always on top.
How would you like to see our problems with pogos end?
End the pogos.
Would you consider running for office in the future?
It would be hypocrisy to say no.
Please.
At that time, how much was your first pay?
If I'm not mistaken, it was like $120 per week.
Oh, wow. So before we say goodbye to you, you can take off your sunglasses so people can see you better. Always stay at the forefront.
OpenAI has launched a new series of bots built to answer really tough questions. AI models are designed to spend more time processing problems before spitting out an answer. First reported by Reuters, the new products are capable of reasoning through complex tasks. OpenAI says that makes them better able to solve challenging problems in science, coding and math. Known within the firm as Strawberry, they've officially been branded as O1 and O1 Mini. The O1 version will be available in ChatGPT from Thursday. In a blog post, the firm said the new model scored 83% on the qualifying exam for the International Mathematics Olympiad. That compares with just 13% for a previous model. The new bot also exceeded human PhD-level accuracy on some scientific tests. An OpenAI researcher said the system was built on so-called chain-of-thought reasoning, which breaks complex problems down into small steps. The models have refined their abilities through training and learning from their mistakes.
Rồi mình sẽ hỏi xem khách hàng về cái bé chó bé mèo đấy, tính cách của bé như thế nào, đặc điểm của bé trên hình dạng như thế nào, và mình sẽ hỏi về cái tình cảm của bé cũng như là của khách hàng đối với bé như thế nào để mình có thể tưởng tượng ra một câu chuyện trong đầu và mình có thể là hiểu và hình dung ra rõ ràng hơn về cái công việc mình sắp tới sẽ làm cho bé.
Lúc em vừa mới nhận được sản phẩm thì em cảm giác rất là bất ngờ, bởi vì không thể nghĩ được là một tác phẩm làm bằng len nó lại giống thật như thế. Và em thấy được cái hồn của chú mèo thông qua đôi mắt, thông qua những cái chi tiết như là cái mũi này, cái râu này, cảm giác nó rất là thật, như là chú mèo được sống lại.
Ngoài việc mang lại thu nhập cho mình thì nó còn mang lại cho mình là nó giúp mình cảm nhận mọi thứ sâu sắc hơn, cũng như là luyện cho mình cái tính kiên nhẫn, kiên trì trong công việc của mình. Tại vì là hiện tại giờ mọi người thì đang rất nhanh, tức là mọi thứ xung quanh xảy ra rất nhanh, thì công việc này làm cho mình cảm thấy chậm lại, kết nối được sâu sắc hơn với bản thân mình cũng như là những thứ mà mình đang.
Mình treo cái tác phẩm này ở trong phòng ngủ của mình để nó nhắc nhớ cho mình về một cái cách sống, mà chính là luôn cho đi một cái tình cảm vô điều kiện, như là những bạn thú cưng vẫn luôn hàng ngày làm công việc đấy với mỗi người chúng ta.
Up next on Billionario News Channel.
is The Scorecard, where you score the latest sports news and in-depth views. I'm Anton Rojas. On The Scorecard tonight, it's Game 1 of the WNBA semifinals in New York and Minnesota. Monitor the mid-ranked movements in the NCAA's 100th season. Lessons learned and tables turned in Season 87 of the UAP. Eliza gives back and looks forward in a volleyball clinic last weekend. All that and more on The Scorecard tonight, the last day of September. Now, here's our roundup. The WNBA semifinals started this morning and the claws were as sharp as the shooting. The New York Liberty made a strong statement at home by defeating the Las Vegas Aces 87-77 in Game 1 of their best of